Coming up on this edition of In the Line of Duty.
While searching for those weapons, one of our seasoned detectives failed to perceive the danger to him and was struck by a train and killed.
Lessons learned by the officers involved in the line of duty.
At some point in their careers, most law enforcement officers have seen the carnage resulting from railroad tragedy. Hello and welcome to In the Line of Duty. I'm Don Marsh.
And I'm Ron Barber. The images of such horror can remain with you for a lifetime, especially if the victim is a fellow law enforcement officer. Still, there are always lessons to be learned and never forgotten.
Scenes such as this one are repeated around 200 times each year in the United States. A funeral for a cop. In most such ceremonies, officers come from throughout a given state or region to pay their respects, to say goodbye to an officer who in many cases they never even knew, but who was still a part of their very being, a cop who had just been trying to do an enormously tough job just like them. In this case, officers from throughout California have gathered in Brea, a small community east of Los Angeles, because 48-year-old veteran cop Terry Fincher has been killed in the line of duty.
The program states that I'm to give a eulogy, but I can't do this. I won't call it that. The dictionary defines a eulogy as a speech given on behalf of someone who has recently died. But in my heart, Terry will never die. As long as there is just one of you who will pin the badge of trust on and go out and do this job, Terry lives on.
No funeral for any police officer who has ever died in the line of duty has been by the book. They are all agonizing and gut-wrenching. But in the case of this funeral, it is poignantly so because of the circumstances in which Terry Fincher died, almost beyond belief, and yet with circumstances which could so easily congeal and claim others in and out of law enforcement. For Detective Fincher was not killed by gun, by knife, by human perpetrator. He was killed by a train, which by all accounts, he never saw, never heard, and never felt. It began with a search alongside Burlington Northern Santa Fe tracks on a bright sunny day for a weapon used the night before in an assault.
We had an incident at a bar that's in a county area where four guys got in an altercation with a subject who lives in Yorba Linda. They followed him to his Yorba Linda residence and beat him up and used some baseball bats and other weaponry, and then left the area on foot and ran along some railroad tracks and disposed of the armament. So the next morning at first light, after we'd already made the arrest, we went back to look for the weapons. The street that borders the area runs like so. The bar that we were talking about is located over here in county area. This is a residential area here. There's a bend with parallel railroad tracks that travel off the roadway in this fashion. The subjects, after assaulting our resident in this area up in here, then ran down along the tracks and discarded the baseball bats. One of our officers saw the subjects leaving, detained them. We did a drive-by. We made the arrests, and at first light we went back to look for the bats. We had officers starting at this location. There's another street that actually comes in off of here. And detectives starting here, walking in this direction. The detective was called by one of the officers over here because he found what he believed to be something that was discarded, some papers. So he joined him over here. This detective kept walking in this fashion. At some point in time, the train came from this direction. Now, I'm not sure, and nobody ever will be sure, what Detective Fincher saw or heard, but there are two sets of tracks, and by this time, he was almost even with these guys here, which is some 500 yards from here. So the different distance is about 500 yards. And in looking back across the tracks, as these turn, it's difficult to perceive exactly which set of tracks the train is on. Now, a lot of people are under the assumption that trains, like cars, travel on the right-hand side of the roadway. In other words, if you're going this direction here being west, if you're going west, you'd be on this set of tracks. And if you're going east, you'd be on this set of tracks. That obviously is not the case. But three things came into play. First off, as you look back, again, it's difficult to perceive which track that train is on. First thing. Secondly, he's off both sets of tracks. He crossed this one and crossed this one. He's standing outside of this set of tracks. Was not on the tracks by all accounts, including the conductors. The third thing is these tracks sit up on what is called cinder shale. It's shale that is the tracks are embedded into, the purpose of which, when you have a 140-ton train using steel tracks, it'll vibrate such that it'll actually break the steel. So they put it on material that is designed to dampen the load. It also dampens the vibration. And finally, the sound. I asked the engineers, how could it be that someone wouldn't hear the sound? The distance from the height of the train to the horn that's on top is 22 feet. At 22 feet projecting over the top of you, you have a sound wall here, dampening material here, and a block wall over here. It's kind of a tunnel effect. Acoustics people tell me that that can actually project right over the top of you without you actually hearing it. That sounded a little strange to us until a TV crew went out 2 nights later to do a story. And were it not for the cameraman telling the reporter, a train is coming, and make him look up, he would have been victim number 2.
And after all these circumstances had come together, the final scientific blow of this tragedy.
I understand that a train that size moving at that speed creates a vortices effect. Those who fly know what that is. It's kind of a wind tunnel effect. It will suck you in to whatever's moving through the air that fast. Something this powerful, this big, moving at speeds over 55, 60, 65 miles an hour will suck you in from as far away as 4 feet. The faster it goes, the more tendency it has to do that. All indications are that Terry was at least 2 feet off the track. And by that I mean the second rail. This train has a step that comes out about like so. He was hit by the step, pushed into the front portion of the train, and struck from behind. This officer turned when he heard the sound. Again, Terry was closer to the sound, so it would have projected over him. Saw the train approaching, waved at Terry. Terry looked at him in confusion, as if to say, what? What's going on? And again, because of the sound walls, we don't know that he ever heard this officer. This officer began going towards Terry on a dead run and just didn't get there in time. Terry looked up at him, smiled as if to say, what's the problem? Not perceiving the danger. And then the last thing that this officer saw was the train going by, and he didn't see Terry. He ran over after the train passed, didn't see Terry where Terry was last standing, looked up and down the track and saw Terry's body past where he had run already.
What really burned this tragedy into one's memory banks was what happened to Chief Lentini towards the end of our incident walkthrough.
As you can see, the tracks run parallel. They're on the same level. And as your eye follows the tracks eastward, you can see how they blend together as they round the corner. Most people perceive that vehicles drive on the right-hand side of the roadway. Trains aren't held to those same rules. The tracks tracks on the south side are used by trains both going east and west depending on the timetables. So where one might think that naturally the trains traveling westbound would be on the northern set of tracks, that wasn't the case in this particular instance. Terry completely crossed this set of tracks, completely crossed this set of tracks, and was on the outside, standing approximately at this edge when the train came. And as you can see, I'm still outside the tracks, but the step projects 2 feet past the end of this tie. In other words, it hit right about here. That, coupled with the rush of wind that's created by an object that size moving that fast, sucked him into the train. The back of the step hit him behind the leg, drug him for a few feet, flipped him completely over and threw him. He was actually struck back towards that greenery on the track there, off the sound wall there. And as you can see, and let's go completely off the track so that I feel a little more comfortable about this. And this is where we're safe at this point. Up there we weren't. So if you follow the sound wall, see how high this is. You follow the sound wall and see the greenery that's growing up the side of it. That's where he was struck. And if you pan this direction to where a thoughtful citizen is placed across here, that's how far his body was thrown. And Terry was almost 6 foot, 220 pounds, well-built individual, lifted weights, and was in good shape. There was no light matter for a train to throw him that far. But it took the train almost a half mile to stop. Well, the other officers had made their way almost even with the street here, and they were no further from us to where that outcropping of growth is there on the wall. They looked up and they kept shouting to Terry, but because of the sound here, if someone walks down there and yells to you, you won't be able to hear them very well. In fact, if you wanted to demonstrate that without a mic, you'd understand what I'm talking about. Because you have a natural sound barrier in the hills there and the greenery, but you can also see a block wall on top of that. And this wall is built to dampen the sound, specifically designed to dampen the sound for the residents on the other side of that wall. It works quite effectively, too effectively, I might add. Cars here are probably going about 40, that UPS van. And that's a little easier for the mind to define. But something as big as a train, it's like watching a house move that fast. You don't expect something that big to move that quickly. It's you're kind of in a time and space distortion there. Your mind has a hard time perceiving it. It looks so small and insignificant at first glance, and then suddenly it's upon you and looks huge. And by that time, it's too late.
That's going in the opposite direction.
And it's moving much slower.
Is that because they know we're here?
Yeah, that's what the page was about. Now,
Any observations?
well, one I'd like to point out to you, I got the page that the train was coming as we crossed the tracks.